Hey everybody, today is Tuesday, December 1st, and we are going to take a trip around the world. And now that I say December 1st out loud, I remembered it is my birthday, so it's going to be the 49th birthday edition trip around the world. I just got in from work, so this is going to be a really spur of the moment video. I've had a couple people ask me to shoot an around the world update. I haven't done one in a little while, so I'm not really sure if I've got a whole lot to talk about this week, but that's never stopped me before. I'm sure I'll think of something. So away we go. We've got my 40-gallon waterfall tank. Have not done a lot with this as far as the waterfall aspect of it goes. I've just been kind of letting it tick over and run. For those of you who remember, I had a leak recently. As is the case with most of the small leaks that I've had, it kind of self-plugged. I just assume that algae and crud and growth and stuff just kind of gets in there and clogs it up. And shortly after I noticed it was leaking, it stopped all by itself and I haven't had to worry about it. I am about to remove this piece of plant. You can see it's in this 1-gallon size planter down here, and it's nothing but these two stalks that come up. I've even got them on plant stakes to hold them up, and they come all the way up here, and it's not till you get up here that you actually see the foliage. And I've even got a couple little flowers on this one. This is a male plant, so the flowers are pretty small. But this is a Rex begonia. Awesome plant, but what I think I'm going to do is cut it here and maybe make cuttings and reroot these. I've got another one in the other room that's got roots on it. It's in a bucket of water. I got them all over the place. I keep making cuttings of them and I don't know what to do with all of them. So this one's just getting a little too tall and weird looking to be in here. It's actually kind of getting in the way of this light. It shines more on these begonias than it does the waterfall itself. So that gives you a pretty good idea of how much the light was hitting them. So the tank itself, nothing really to talk about. I did do a big water change. I shot a video recently. I just cleared a bunch of mulm and stuff out of there. As is usual with this tank, the nitrates were pretty much at zero. I did scoop a bunch of guppies out of my tank in the office and threw them in here. So if you're noticing there's a lot more fish swimming around in here than you're used to seeing, that's because all those guppies are in there. I also put a chunk of Anubias in here. If you haven't seen since my last update, that's probably new. And other than that, I cannot really think of anything else that's going on in here other than we're in the need of doing some maintenance again. I gotta fix up the filter over here. You can see I'm getting mostly backflow. Not much of it's actually coming through the filter side. Most of it's coming through the emergency backflow side. So I'll need to get in and swap that out, do a simple water change, and that's probably about it. I'll get in there and gravel vac and suck some of that mulm and stuff out of there in the process. Somebody actually pointed out in this video this little crab right here the other day in one of the videos where I was talking about it. And this is not a new crab. This is actually a very, very old crab. I was cleaning out some old junk in the basement the other day, cleaning out one of the back corners and throwing some stuff away, and I found the desiccated and mummified old crab. I was going to shoot a video about it, and that's why I brought it over here and set it on that rock so I wouldn't forget about it. And then of course I promptly forgot about it, and now there's just a little dead crab sitting there. But somebody did notice that and ask about that, but that's what that is. That's just a dead crab I found in the corner of the basement. And no, there are no more red-clawed crabs in this tank. There haven't been red-clawed crabs in this tank in quite a long time. Honestly, I haven't really looked closely in this tank for a while. I know there's still some guppies swimming around in there, and I know my cherry barb is still swimming around in there. I've seen them recently, but I don't know about the shrimp or whether the guppies are breeding or anything. Actually, I can see some little tiny baby guppies swimming around right now that I'm looking. So yes, the guppies are still breeding, and I think that was a little tiny shrimp that just went by. So the shrimp might also be breeding. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but I'll look into that next time I get in there and do any actual maintenance on that tank. So that's about all I can think of to talk about on this tank. Let's go ahead and get the light turned off so it's not glaring up the rest of the tanks as we go around the room. My 29 miscellaneous is in need of a little bit of simple maintenance. You can see how low the water is, so at the very least I need to top the water off. But I will probably get in there and do a water change. I did a pretty big water change recently and removed a bunch of crud and stuff that was growing on the leaves here of my Anubias. I got that all nice and cleaned up. Of course, my Java fern over here still looks pretty good. I love the way you can see the roots that have actually grabbed a hold of the rocks and are spreading out across the rocks down there. It's taken years for this to get this way. And that's because this tank only has the stock lighting. This was a Walmart package deal, and it comes with these little LEDs as part of it when you buy it. And that's all the lighting I have in this tank. All my other tanks have a lot of lighting compared to what you would normally think of in a fish tank, and I think that's why the plants grow so lush compared to tanks like this that have fairly basic standard amount of lighting. And again, this Java fern here is years old, and yet I don't remember the last time I've had to go in here and actually pull any Java fern out of here. Same thing with this little piece of Anubias down here. This is actually Anubias, and that thing has been in there for years and years. It just sits there like it's in stasis or something. Even my Anubias here has only been cut once or twice in the last several years that it's been in there. So I don't get a lot of growth out of this tank. I do have a lot of nutrients in this tank, but I don't get a lot of growth in this tank, and I assume it's because I don't have a huge amount of lighting on the tank. I also, if you will notice in this tank, don't have any of the cyanobacteria. I don't have algae growing all over everything. So, you know, it's tit for tat. There's a price to pay for having my tank so brightly lit. I do love a brightly lit tank, but, you know, as I said, there's a price to pay for it. So that's what's going on in my 29 miscellaneous. Not a lot. Just need some basic maintenance, a little top off maybe, filter change, that sort of thing. We get to my 55-gallon gourami tank, and also could use a little bit of maintenance. The glass could be wiped down, but this is a tank that also has a fairly significant amount of lighting. It's nothing amazing or high dollar. In fact, it's very low budget. It's a $13 LED shop lamp, or a shop light, 4 foot. I'm not sure if I got these at Walmart or I got these. I think I got these at the Lowe's or the Home Depot, but you can see it is literally just a very, very inexpensive LED shop light, but it puts out a ton of light, and it's a pretty good quality light too. It doesn't look bad at all for what you pay, especially. So I long ago realized that spending a lot of money on aquarium lights that are, you know, specifically designed for an aquarium is just unnecessary for my needs. Some people, you know, may have a need for some very specific lighting, but I don't. All I need is a good high amount of a fairly decent quality light, and I'm good to go. My tanks grow like crazy, and of course all of the stuff in them grows like crazy, all the cyanobacteria and the algae and everything else. So that's part of why I constantly struggle with that kind of stuff, and I will be shooting a video about that kind of stuff here in the future too, what our tanks look like and how much algae grows in them, cyanobacteria, ways to maintain it, all that kind of stuff. I've been thinking about that a lot today, but I don't feel like I'm ready to sit down and shoot a video about it just yet, so we're doing this one instead. Alright, that's my gourami tank. Not a lot to talk about, but we had a look at it. Same thing going on here with my 55-gallon tank. In this tank, however, we can talk a little bit about the cyanobacteria. Got into this tank in a significant way not too long ago, within the last several months. And you can see now it has gone from being just a little bit down here in this right-hand corner, which is where I first saw it. I noticed that green stuff starting to grow on the gravel down there. And now you can see it's growing all over the rock. And eventually it's made its way up, and it's now growing on some of the Anubias. And it's definitely got a foothold in this tank. So we're going to be doing a ChemiClean treatment on this tank in the near future. I honestly don't think I've ever done a ChemiClean treatment on this tank. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember the last time I did a filter change on this tank either. So I'm in the middle of working on some other tanks right now with the ChemiClean. So I can't like do all my tanks at once. That's part of why I always get it coming back, is I never fully get rid of it. And it's always here somewhere in one of my tanks or multiple tanks. It's always lurking around and it always makes its way back. So this tank will have to get a treatment soon, and when I do that, maybe we'll talk about it in a little more detail and go into a little more depth about the whole treatment process and all that kind of stuff. I know I've talked about it before, but it's something that's relevant to what's going on in my fish tanks, so we will probably be talking about it again. Moving on to my just found that on the floor, and that looks like a mosquito fish. And if it's on the floor over here, it probably got tossed in the trash can and I must have missed, because I have found a few mosquito fish on the floor in front of my native tank. So I think that's where that came from. I was wondering what fish that could possibly be on the floor over here, but that was a mosquito fish, so no big mystery. I must have just missed the trash can when I threw it away the other day. My 40 breeder, nothing really going on in here. My Crenocycla regani died not too long ago. Probably most people are familiar with that by now. Other than that, I haven't done anything at all to this tank. I've actually been kind of holding off on the amount of algae wafers I've been putting in there, just to see how much natural cleaning I can get out of it by letting the fish in here do their thing. And you can see we're getting down almost to bare wood in some places. We're actually working our way through some of that reddish stuff. And again, it's not really that purplish red if you're standing here in person. It's more of a brown color, and it's not that bright purple. But that is the cyanobacteria stuff growing in there, I'm sure. That's what all that dark stuff growing on the leaves is. And only so much of it gets chewed on and scraped up by the various algae-eating fish that are in here. I've got a couple of rubber lip plecos in here that do the main bulk of the work with the scraping and everything. You can see how scoured clean a lot of the stuff is. And then I've got the Siamese algae eaters in here, which eat the hair algae and stuff, and they do a great job of keeping the tank clean. So for as little maintenance as I do on this tank, and for as much stuff as in there, it actually is being kept pretty clean by the fish that are in it. I'm kind of impressed by that. Other than that, I personally haven't done a whole lot of anything since my fish has died in here. We've just been kind of letting it do its thing. Not a whole lot to worry about at the moment. Very, very lightly stocked tank at this point. Not so lightly stocked tank is my 125-gallon New World tank. And that is my tripod still sitting there from the other day, if you're wondering what that black thing sticking out is. Not too much to talk about in this tank. I really probably should get in here and do a little more in the way of gravel vacuuming. It's pretty grungy, and every time the fish dart and dash and kick around, it stirs up so much crud into the water. It takes a half an hour for it to clear up again. So I could probably stand with reducing that a little bit. Got a snail right here, but I'm noticing this long string hanging off the snail. I've experienced in the past when I've had mystery snails die, they got very mucousy right before they died. And while that is a nearite snail, I'm wondering if the same thing's not happening. I didn't even know I had any nearite snails left in this tank until I got in here and did some work recently. And it turns out I've still got two of them in here. I've got this light colored one, and then there's a really dark one. So the most recent thing I've done in this tank was to get in here and remove a bunch of wood. I had a huge piece of woodwork at this end of the tank, and now that I've pulled it out, the tank doesn't look nearly as heavily stocked as it did, and the fish are not getting banged up and scraped and scratched. I'm seeing far fewer scratch scales and injuries and whatnot. Speaking of injuries, this big shiner right here, you can kind of see the mark on its side. It's almost completely healed over now.
I said in my last video when we looked at this fish that it was healing up nicely. I wasn't concerned about it, but I was keeping an eye on it, and you can see it has indeed healed up nicely. So nothing really to worry about. Now that the fish have so much more swimming around room, I'm really happy about that. And honestly, I am actually considering, as much as I love this piece of wood right there, that once again, it's big and bold and beautiful and dramatic and all that kind of stuff, but is it necessary? It really is taking up an awful lot of space in this tank. This could be a really nice open tank with fish swimming around in it, and I could still have some woodwork in there. I just don't have to have, you know, a small forest in there. I got a tree that's sticking out the top. I mean, we've got this piece over here goes up above the light bar, and again, it's visually stunning and it's very dramatic, but is it really necessary? Do I need all of that space being taken up? I don't know. I like it. The pleco seems to like it. You can see how scraped clean the wood is. So the pleco I've got in this tank, it's high fin spotted pleco. Don't know what its real name is, but that's what it was sold to me as from PetSmart. So whatever that is gets in there and scours that wood, and it does a pretty good job of keeping the rest of the tank clean too. So I don't know, it's just an idea, something I was thinking about. I know, again, as I said, that piece of wood really does, you know, make that tank pop. It really stands out. But it takes up a lot of space. Moving on, we're going to bypass my snail tank. Not a lot to talk about there. Actually, let me turn this fan off. We can have one quick look. When I replaced the filter last time, I didn't get all of the Java moss out of there, and I actually never got around to putting a new filter pad in, and so it's actually sort of just filtering through the Java moss. I don't really need it to physically filter anything out and remove any detritus or anything. I just need it to keep the water moving around in the tank and circulating a little tiny bit. That's all my needs are. So I think that Java moss in there looks pretty cool, even though nobody ever sees it. Well, I guess some people see it occasionally, but for the most part, that just stays in there invisible. As far as the mulm and stuff, that just collects on the bottom. I don't care about that. I don't need that being collected in the filter material itself. So in the meantime, we're going to let that moss keep doing its thing, and not going to worry about it. My native tank here, let me get everything out of my way so we can stand back and have a better look at it. I've got some really good video of this lately. Did some really good close-up and some macro shots of the crayfish. I've got some good close-up shots of the sculpin in there. I'm sorry, the darters, I should say. I have two of them, and the more closely I look at them, for those of you who remember me saying that I think they were two different species because they look very different, I actually do think they're the same now. They look like they're just slight color variants on the same patterning and same marking. But there's a lot of darters that look really similar to that. So again, I'm just not sure, and I'm not that concerned about it. As I've said before, it's just academic. You know, it's just knowledge for the sake of knowledge. I'm not breeding them. I don't need to know necessarily what they are. But out of curiosity, it would be interesting to know exactly what they are. I believe them to be tessellated darters. There's another type of darter called a Johnny darter, and there is some controversy over whether or not Johnny darters and tessellated darters are different species, but very similar. Two subspecies within the same species, or are they the same species that are simply separated by geography? In any of those cases, the Johnny darters are west of me, out in western Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio. That area would be the Johnny darter. And if you find them over near the Susquehanna or around where I am, they would be the tessellated darters. So even though they might be the exact same, it's definitely not going to be called the Johnny darter if it's around here. I believe it to be the tessellated darter. So got some good video of that. I got some good video of my crayfish, but I do not yet have any really good video of the fish I believe to be a mottled sculpin. And that's a really interesting looking fish, but I'm concerned about that one because I have not yet seen it eat anything. I know that's a predatory fish in the wild too, but I've not yet gotten it to eat any of the bloodworms or mysis shrimp or anything. I threw a handful of small snails in there. I've read that they will eat snails. It doesn't look like it's emaciated or anything yet, but at the same time, I have not yet seen it eat anything. I've put shrimp pellets and granules and flakes and all kind of that stuff in there. But I wasn't really expecting it to eat any of them. Surprised none of those little darters I was talking about have come darting up to the front. They usually do. They're usually right up here because they've learned that when I come to the front of the tank, food's usually coming in. So anyway, this has been my tank of fascination that I've been spending the most time looking at and enjoying, tinkering with. I need to add some more leaves to it, and I actually want to put some more sticks in there so that the fish have some more natural forage and natural cover and stuff. So the next fairly nice day we get, we will be taking a trip back down to the stream to collect some more stuff, maybe even collect some more fish to put in this tank. So moving on to my 125. This is one of the tanks that is currently being treated for the cyanobacteria. As I mentioned earlier, the other tank is my office tank. We're not going to be looking at that in this video. So that's why you see that big air stone there. And then I've got another big air stone down here, which is also right under the power head. And that really gives me a huge amount of gas exchange and aeration in this tank. Not a whole lot to talk about. For those of you who follow along and you know we've been having issues with the loaches and the skinny loaches, and my big loach was finally getting really skinny. I'm sad to say that my big loach finally died the other day. I came down, found it floating in here, and so now none of my clown loaches have survived. I'm not going to get into a conversation about that right now. Maybe one of these days in the future we can talk about it. I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. I've thought about it 6 ways from Sunday. I tried to do everything I could to medicate them. I read everything I could possibly read about skinny loaches and the diseases, associated with that, and nothing happened, and just weird experience all the way around. Like I said, we'll talk about that in a video coming up. Again, I got a million videos I want to shoot, but I only get around to shooting so many of them, so we'll see. But anyway, we're getting done with the ChemiClean treatment in here. I've learned over the years that just dosing it and calling it good, because that's what it says on the instructions, isn't always going to be necessary, or can't think of the word I'm looking for, isn't always going to be effective. Sometimes you have to get in there and you have to do multiple doses, or you even have to be maybe even a little heavy-handed on how much you're dosing in there. And this tank had so much stuff in there, and there's so much surface area and so much limited circulation. I mean, how much medication is really getting into the middle of that? Excuse me. And so multiple dosage on tanks like this is usually necessary, and I think I did 3 dosings on this tank, and we're pretty much now done. All I really need to do is get in there, do some water change, get the air stones out of it, tidy it up a little bit, and we should be done doing the ChemiClean treatment with this tank. There's a frog in my throat, can't get it out. My 20-gallon angelfish tank needs a little bit of maintenance, like most of my tanks. This one probably needs more than the others. The water itself, I'm sure, is not that bad. If I were to bother getting in there and testing the nitrate in this tank, I'm sure it's not terrible. But you can see that the filter could probably stand to use a change. It's actually not that bad. We're not getting a ton of backflow, but we're not getting a ton of flow either. So we've probably got, excuse me, probably got a little bit of clogged up intake or something like that, is reducing the flow and making it look like that. So that'll get addressed. I'll have to wipe down the glass, of course, and as usual, this tank always grows a nice green carpet in there, and that is in fact the cyanobacteria, because it always just comes back. No matter what I do, it always comes back. So it's just part of the cycle. Again, we'll talk about this later. I've likened it to doing lawn care before. You don't mow your lawn once and you're done with it. You mow your lawn once, and a week later you got to mow your lawn again. And I know the idea that ChemiClean, or I always interchange ChemiClean and cyanobacteria. The idea that cyanobacteria should be able to simply be treated and be done, and once you've gotten it out of your tank, it should be done. But in my case, that's just never been the case. It always comes back no matter what I do. Again, we'll talk more in detail about that, but trust me, I've been there, done that long ago, got tired of fighting the stuff, and it's just part of how the tank works. I look at the cyanobacteria about the same way as I look at algae. You know, algae just builds up in the tank. I've got them brightly lit. I've got lots of nutrients in the tank. You're going to have algae. You know, and for whatever reason, I get the cyanobacteria along with it. So I deal with it, I treat it, and that's just part of how my tanks function. Again, we'll talk about that more in the future. Otherwise, not a lot to talk about with this tank. It's just, you know, kind of in need of some maintenance. I did lose a fish in this tank recently. My last platinum guppy I had was in this tank, and it is no longer with me. Actually, I may still have one platinum guppy left in the waterfall tank, but I know this was one of my last platinum guppies was in this tank, and it is now no longer with us. So getting on to my brackish tank. Get the forward light turned on here. Not much going on in this tank either. Butterbean's in there just doing his thing. He still looks good. If you remember my last Round the World update, I had talked about how the white markings on him, like the lesions or whatever he had for so many years, they're pretty much gone. He just looks good now. The little bit of the light spots you can see, like above his eyes and on his back, those are actually just his markings. If you look at them really closely, you'll see that they're that same color yellow or gold or whatever you want to call the rest of his body. And he really doesn't have those markings anymore. So keeping them in brackish water all the time apparently is not really a good idea. I'll have to talk about that in a video too. I guess that's probably a good idea to talk about that. There's a lot of confusion about whether or not these fish are considered brackish or freshwater or what. And I have been of the camp for years that they are brackish fish, hence my brackish aquarium. I set up a brackish tank just so I could have this fish. And it turns out that keeping it in brackish water is probably not the best idea. It probably does need to just be in either very hard freshwater or mildly almost brackish water like what I've got this one in right now. The specific gravity in this water is 1.003. So we are just below what would be considered brackish. 1.004 is the minimum you'll see anybody call brackish. It's usually 1.005 is where people start referring to it as brackish water. And I do still mix up the marine salts. I take my RO water and I mix instant ocean marine salts. I just don't mix it up to the salinity that would be marine water. I just mix it up a little bit and I get it up to a salinity of 1.003. And that's what we've got in here now, and it seems to be the sweet spot that works really well for him. And then, of course, you can see I've got a bunch of the little guppies swimming around in there, too. I put a bunch of them in there from my office tank. I've got a couple of females in there that breed all the time, and I'm always looking for places to put guppies that the other fish aren't going to gobble them right up. So there you go. That's about all I can think of. We are back to where we started, more or less. Kept it under half an hour this time. That was a short one. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget this one here is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.